Good morning. Welcome to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Whew, I almost caught my tongue there for a second. I couldn't finish the sentence. Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? Welcome back to Tuesday with this fun Explicit Measures. Good morning, everyone.
Happy Tuesday.
Happy 2022.
It's a new year.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh man, I gotta think about that one. 2022.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That also works.
Every day, all the day. It's the T's, man, that provide the punctuation with a high voice or something like that.
It's gonna be an interesting day on February 2nd, 2022. Gonna be lots of twos and zeros.
2-2.
Yeah, see?
22,
These are the kind of things that I think about when the new year hits.
How many days you can consecutively like hit numbers, right?
Palindrome numbers or whatever that is.
Yeah.
I wonder if that breaks any reports.
It does. It's Y2K for 2022.
Actually, I didn't mean I did ask about an intro literally 10 seconds ago, but I just thought of one. Since we are in the new year, this is the time for me that the tech debt comes to pay.
Oh man.
Yes.
I don't know if you guys have
The
certain
piper
things.
comes to town. He's looking for money.
How many things didn't work at the beginning of the year?
That's what I'm finding out.
Somebody set up a user account that expired at the end of the year.
How many
reports did you have that were set behind the scenes to filter year to date?
It's a scramble time.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my day today.
All those awesome choices that you made during the year. Be like, oh yeah, it'll be great.
They weren't your choices. They're someone else's choices. You're fixing other people's problems, right?
Fixing people's problems.
I just realized
the most ironic thing of the new year thus far is I'm sitting here for the last 15 minutes looking at Mike going, something's different. And it takes the chat to describe that. Oh yeah, he's shaved.
Oh my gosh.
I was waiting for you guys to notice.
I'm like, something's wrong. It just doesn't feel right.
This has been funny. I've gone 2 days with clean shaven. And I've been waiting for someone just to even notice it. And you guys have been talking to me this morning for
I didn't notice
10, 15 minutes already. Yeah. Didn't even notice it yet. Yeah.
Well, the difference though is the first time. I've seen both now.
That's
multiple
true.
times.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So, but the first time, like I think you had it for a while.
Yeah.
You had it for a long while.
Yep.
So,
exactly.
So this was actually a brief stint.
I think it's actually just about as long as my other ones. It's just I started a lot earlier. I think I started very early in the season. Typically, I started November? I would start growing the beard, then I would bring it down. I don't know.
Well, now when it gets
the wrong time of season to do that, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, 2022. I figured it was getting itchy. I was like, I'm done. It was a weird thing a long time ago. I was like, I've never really grown a beard before. Can I even grow one? And I did it, and I loved it. I was like, it's way too itchy. Get rid of it. And I was like, oh crap. So yeah, I'm probably not gonna have too many beards from now moving forward.
I don't think we've talked about this, but the general consensus from my family when I shaved a year or 2 ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago,
like put it back on.
Don't do that again, Dad.
My wife does a little bit weird. I do.
You grow a beard in like 15 minutes. Like this.
Yeah. This is literally like 5 minutes ago.
You just shaved and you already have a 5 o'clock shadow.
Yeah, I have to shave every day, or it's already itchy. But I do need to give a shout out to Pasquale from Puglia. So let's go. Even though I'm not technically from Puglia, I'm from the west side of Italy, or the family is. But we have an Italian, another from Italy, actually on the podcast today.
See,
that's cool.
So,
and Tommy was just talking about how when he was growing up, he's like, I'm a 65-year-old in a 30-year-old body. And I was like, no, Tommy, you're just Italian. He's all the music he used to listen to when he was growing up, and so yeah, those are just Italian things. You do those.
Well, I mean, literally Sunday, what we did, I mean, and this is every Sunday, so this is just, which I love, is I made a bolognese red sauce, put on Bocelli on, and we had angel hair. It's perfect. But this may be a shorter podcast because I just realized I have all these dim date filters for like 2021, but I was like, yeah, I don't need 2022 in there. Except today.
And now it starts all your date calendars. Why is everything returning blanks? I have a large numbers. It just keeps growing each day. Oh boy.
This is like the housing market when the interest goes up. Time to pay. So,
oh boy.
It's tech debt.
See, that's actually an interesting question. How do you solve that so that the date calendar is a bit more dynamic? Do you use a DAX date calendar, or do you use an M date calendar?
No, we use a DAX date calendar, but actually what I started doing, but not for all my reports, because
Tech
part of the
debt.
tech day. Yeah, tech debt is
Tech debt.
basically now we have basically like it's on or before today. So it'll just basically update as the day goes on. So I don't want anything after today.
Yes.
So because I
Gotcha.
also didn't need December when we were in July.
True.
Especially so
Well,
especially
date calendars are interesting because if you don't build them correctly, you start putting dates on the report that are not real or
Right.
things that don't pertain to what you're trying to build. Like, for
Right.
example, if your data is only historical looking, if you start putting dates in the future, it doesn't help you because now people can select a date where there's no data. And it's like, no, that's not relevant.
Right.
Interesting.
So that's today. Welcome back, guys.
I saw an interesting thread. This is actually the date calendar thing actually brings up an interesting question here. Matthew Roach from Microsoft was actually asking about date calendars. Does anyone have a good M date calendar that they use? And I posed the question, why use an M date calendar versus a DAX date calendar? And I'm curious for you guys, do you guys prefer a calendar built out in M, or would you prefer a calendar built out in DAX?
Neither.
You don't do date calendars at all? You just use auto date time?
Yeah, auto date time all the way.
Auto date time forever.
Is that a problem? Is that not best practice?
Yeah, best practice.
We actually have like a master date calendar, and I actually create a data flow from it so we can add other things to it. So we just connect to the data flow.
Okay.
But so because everyone's using the same thing, I don't have to recreate it either. Like we have a data flow called dim master, which has some of our master reference tables.
Sure.
So it's actually built in Excel or SQL. And that's where all of our data stuff, like quarter year, our fiscal year, all that stuff's built. So I don't have to recreate the wheel every single time I create a report.
Gotcha.
So,
but that technically means then you are pulling it in from a data flow, and so your tech. So I would quantify that as yes, you're still doing it outside of the scope of Power Query. You're not writing it all solely in Power Query, but because you're reusing it, that's a Power Query date table. You're pulling in from somewhere else.
I am pulling from somewhere else. But the nice thing, rather than pulling from Power BI straight to the SQL, it's the data flow. So I know it's already loaded. I don't have to worry about anything there. So,
and date calendars are pretty small to begin with.
Right.
Seth, what do you do? Do you do DAX or M for date calendars? Or do you have a mix of both?
I do a mix. I use DAX predominantly though. Like so the Italians have that super
oh my
huge
gosh,
one.
yes.
I've
start there and cut down.
I've trimmed that down.
Yeah.
To the one that everybody uses a lot.
Yeah.
Just because that's like the day calendar and all day calendars. But loading that thing in for every single model is probably a bad idea. But that's an easy way,
I like the fact that you can update it after the fact.
Yeah.
Like so I'd like the fact that I can go
if you needed to add in and it's basically an uncommon of a couple sections in there.
Yes.
And just reprocess. Yeah.
I like that.
So I like that method. I've never done a Power Query one.
I did one once.
Me, it was either I have a date table on the back end, like Tommy's saying, like in the SQL Server database or something.
Yeah.
Or the Italians solved that problem for me.
Regardless, you'll know today when I say I gotta go when I get 18 messages going, hey, where's my data?
Oh, you had a threshold, Tommy?
Yeah, so we should have started at 6:30 in the morning. So
things are light up they're that much on fire, Tommy?
We'll see how important Power BI is at my organization this morning.
Oh boy. Hey, this is also
at least 20 minutes. The workday doesn't start.
Well, it's like a if you don't know if someone's using your report, just turn it off, and you'll quickly someone will let you know, like, hey, we need that. Don't do that. Awesome. Well, let's roll into the actual topic for today. Actual topic for today is just Power BI licenses. Let's just discuss what the licensing is all about. What are the options that you have there? What kind of licenses do we most commonly use? I think that's going to be kind of an interesting point in your organizations or what you're building things. So let's kind of kick it off there for the topic today. We'll see. I'll just throw this out there. This will either be a great conversation or not a great conversation because everyone loves the licensing decision or licensing discussion. So we'll see what happens.
It does sound boring on the onset, right?
It does,
Yeah.
But I mean, in Microsoft typical flair, I think they make the licensing stuff quite interesting. And that's the reason why consultants have jobs, to help people tune costs and optimize and figure out what's the right, like not pattern. What's the right mix of licenses
Yeah.
to optimize the costs? And I
Well,
think, to
yeah.
Microsoft's credit, they're giving you options. You have options to do things, which is great. People don't just like one is large as they are. You can't just make out one licensing plan and be like, okay, here it is, we're done. Because then someone's gonna be like, well, I don't want it that way. I want it a different way.
And licensing by itself is actually just pretty straightforward, pretty boring. But I think it's some of the questions on, well, what should someone have? And that's what you're kind of talking to.
Yeah.
And then how do you actually get to that next step? Or what is that next step? And that's where I think the discussion begins, so to speak.
So let's why don't we break it down into the different licenses
Just define them.
on a high level, right?
Yeah.
Let's overview them and then walk through each of them and maybe discuss some of the things that have changed in them over the course of the last couple years, right?
Totally.
So for brand new listeners or people coming new to Power BI,
surprised you have to pay for it.
They made right off the bat, which was phenomenal, is it's free, right? Like you want to build your own report, you want to talk about models, like all the things we're talking about, you can do for the most part, right? When we're in the PBIX realm in the desktop.
Oh boy.
all the data munging, all the tabular model, like et cetera, it's all free. And you can even publish it to the service for free. In your workspace. It's when you want to start sharing that is when the licensing starts to come in.
So now I can see some
free is a license type.
Exactly. I feel like there's a bet coming. There's going to be a bet. I feel like the conversation's already lend itself to like there's going to be a bet somewhere and someone's going to lose because I'm going to say something here that's going to be maybe controversial or maybe if you remember it or not. I remember there was a point in time where you were able to publish to a workspace as a free user, and you were not required to be a pro user. I thought there was like some controversy around initially you could be a free user and share things with other people.
Like
wow,
the first year, maybe.
This is very early.
No. This is first months.
Yeah, like, that's what I'm saying. I think
you're right. I think you're right. There was a pivot that created a huge discussion in the community because like you originally could share and then they
were like, you know what?
They started to draw the line.
Yeah, here's where it makes sense. It makes sense. It does make sense, right? If you want to share things, you have to do that in a workspace, and workspace is preferred. And then once you got to that level, they're like, okay, now that's going to change from a free user can no longer share things. You can playground in your own My Workspace, but someone else could view your content. I don't remember exactly all the details of it.
Because it was
I
all
think
in
you
the
could just
preview.
share. Yeah,
maybe it was all in preview. I don't remember.
But that could have been
like think about. Oh man, I can't remember.
If anyone who's on the chat who remembers this, all three of you, if you remember the very first day Power BI was made, if you go all the way back to the beginning, do you remember a time when Power BI was free to share it between people, and then you didn't require a pro license? I think that was the original thing because I remember there was a lot of grief in kind of the community because it was a big change. It's definitely the right change. I think it's the right way to go, but I feel like I remember at the very beginning there was this moment of we had this feature and it was now captured by this pro license thing, and it was like we lost it.
I'm not even willing to bet McDonald's. I can't be sure, so
okay.
I'm not willing to put
I know it happened.
I know it
just
happened.
Can't say whether it was preview or whether or not it was actually after GA.
And from what I remember, I thought the only thing that changed was you can share even if you were free, but for My Workspace, like the word, like especially when
maybe that's what it was.
preview.
Maybe it was you could share it from your My Workspace for free, and then from there the other people could consume it.
And let's not forget, free, you could extend your trial for pro.
Yeah, that makes a lot.
Maybe that's what it was.
That's what I remember. But I mean, but you kind of did name the whole distinction between why would you pay, or not to get ahead of ourselves, but it's really that case there. Like, that's why you pay, really.
Correct.
Sharing.
Yep, exactly. So I was going to say, so free, anything else we want to comment on, like free? So downloading Power BI Desktop has always been free. Other software BI packages require you to buy the software, even just to download it. You can't even start or trial it or something like that. You have to buy a license even just to use their software. So that's, I think, honestly, This is a great move I think Microsoft has done. I think it's incredibly smart for them to let you download the software for free and get started right away. Um, it'll be interesting to see what happens when they make this all, in the service at some point in the
Mhm.
future. And then how does that work now with getting free access to Power BI?
Right.
Does that change at all when you build reports in the online now? Is that different? So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of pans out.
And Joe did bring up a great point because that's what we did. Our organization was you just kept extending your pro trial because they didn't know what they were going to do. They were just trying to get the numbers in.
Yeah, yeah,
So they're like, "Hey, you can do you want a pro trial again and again?"
yeah. Keep going.
And we kind of
What
lived
was
off
it?
that
Do
until
you want to
yeah.
extend this free license?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
sure.
sure. Why
No,
not?
no, I want to
I
pay.
I remember the organization I was at. I kept telling them, "We should probably pay soon because it's not going to last forever." But the whole organization was built like we literally had a document saying, "When you sign it for the first time, click on Pro Trial. If
Yep.
it says extend, click
Yeah.
extend." That was our workflow for the organization. Like that's not really the best practice,
No,
but
not best practice. It's good that they kind of clamped down on that.
and then premium came out, and
So,
that's
well, not yet. So let's
okay.
go. Let's
Not
go to
yet.
Hold on.
hold on there.
Are we
Slow
Right,
getting the
down.
right. We
history?
have
Okay.
nothing to
Well,
talk about with licensing. We haven't even gotten past free.
I know, right? All right. Next level of licensing. What's your next level?
Next level is pro,
Pro
right?
licensing.
Which has been around for a while. It was the next step
Yep.
where
mhm,
basically you unlock the capabilities of being able to share any way you want within the Power BI service,
Mhm.
right? Within an organization, outside an organization, it unlocks the keys to
mhm,
having additional workspaces as well,
Yep.
right? So a coin term best practice is, if you're going to share a report with other people in an organization, you should create a different workspace where many people can be members, so you're not sharing things from your own workspace where
Yep.
nobody else has access to the Power BI report and they can't do anything with it. So if you leave, it's quite an ordeal to try to track down PBIX files or where, the old workspace where something was
Yep.
shared from. And that's why you should never, outside of like, hey, buddy, you wanted to see this report, one time out of my workspace or we're testing,
I wouldn't even do that.
it's just not a good idea.
Not a good idea.
So pro unlocks the keys to the vast majority of base level reporting and capabilities within Power BI. And if you think about what you get just with a pro license,
mhm,
right?
Yeah.
If we're talking dollars, it's $10 a month per user.
Yep.
Um, the only caveat there being with the pro license or with somebody who's going to consume the report, as well as the person who's creating the report, you both need a pro license.
pro
So
to
if you're
pro.
going to consume a
Correct.
report from somebody who's sharing it with you in the Power BI service, there's 2 licenses that are
Mhm,
required. So that's the, I think, difference potentially between some of the tooling out there, right? You pay a lot up front and then you don't have like a consumer um
Yes.
license on that.
Yep.
So this is a little bit different from that standpoint,
Mhm.
but it's much more selective, right?
Yes.
A very low upfront cost,
mhm.
and then you can be selective about which consumers actually have access to the reporting that you
And
create.
I like to think of like, so this is how I explain it, and again, you guys can correct me if how you explain it differently. I feel like the pro license is you're now given free reign. You now have access to the PowerBI.com reporting environment, right? So whether or not you're an author of a report or you're sharing reports amongst users in the PowerBI.com environment, a pro license is where that kind of turns on. And correct me if I'm wrong, you can also share reports via Teams and SharePoint, like using
Mhm.
integrations with a pro license. So any pro license user could also see that report embedded into their organization. Is that remember that ring a bell?
Yeah, so
Okay.
pro is basically your pay to play for the
Yep,
organization.
exactly. So that is your pay to play environment. And the reason I'm making this distinction now is there are other licenses that change that. So
Right.
just making the clear note that is the pro license is for your authors and for people who want to consume reports either through embedding them in other applications inside Microsoft, Teams, SharePoint, what other auto integrated things, and then um, the PowerBI.com environment.
The thing to note there that is interesting, right? And as we're talking historically, as
Yep.
we've grown up with Power BI and how the licensing has changed,
Yep.
just because you have those additional capabilities of sharing reports in environments where your end users access them via SharePoint or whatever.
Yep.
If that's allowed in pro licensing, that doesn't circumvent the fact that that end user still needs a pro license.
Correct.
Right?
Everyone who
Which
touches
a
report.
lot of people tried to do. Like,
Yes.
this doesn't work. Why not? Like, because you're still bound by the same
Right.
sharing mechanisms. And I think you still have to share in the service to those end users, even though you're serving up
Yes.
those reports in the
Right.
I believe so. I
those
think
other
that's where
environments.
the viewer role comes into now. That's been added recently, but you have to minimum be a viewer. You have to have a pro license and the viewer
Yes.
to even observe those reports anywhere else, Teams, wherever those things are going to
Right.
be.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads to the distinction of premium and per user. Did it come out the late 2019
Why
or
why don't we hit premium first? Because kind of
Alright.
in order, right?
Yeah.
This is
It
how they
was
were.
free pro.
Yep. This is how they
and
were kind of
then
released.
Premium,
Okay.
right? And premium comes in 2 different flavors.
Three.
Right?
Well, 2, 3. I don't know. You can debate this one.
Yeah.
2.5.
2.5, maybe. It's not really. Yeah, one flavor is not really a good flavor. It's like the bad flavor. It's like the when you
Yeah.
go to like
Your
you
black
know
licorice.
the ice. Yeah, it's like the ice. Yes, like no, we're not gonna get that flavor of ice cream. It's
Right.
not a good flavor.
Right. Do one of you want to tackle the 2, or you just want to keep listening to me drone on?
I'm loving it, man.
I'll take one of these. This is where I spend a lot of time in some of these premium spaces. So let's talk about premium. So premium, I think, changes the mentality here. Everything we've been talking about so far was the free user just kind of consuming it. It's a software as a service. The pro user also software as a service. I'm not really buying infrastructure. It's just I'm able to show up, pay my price, and then I get access to all the things. And then we move into premium, and now we're starting to talk about buying dedicated capacity from Microsoft for a broader team. And there's some distinctions here too, because now at the premium level, I mean, let's talk about pro real quick. Pro licenses made sense for smaller organizations. I've got a team of 10. I've got 10 people working on reports, $10 a user per month. That's 10 times 10. What's that? $1,000? $100? I don't even remember. $100? $100, and then you have $100 a month times 12. You got $1,200 a year for reporting. Great. Everyone can use as much reports as they want. They're happy. When this goes to larger organizations, you've got 30,000 users or larger numbers of users, and you're trying to consume reports. This gets very expensive. You're now talking $300,000 a month for 12 months, and reporting becomes very expensive. Granted, there could be a lot of people using the system, but it didn't. The economy didn't seem to scale so well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now we walk into premium. Premium with kind of like this solution around like, well, hey, you're a bigger organization. You just need to buy capacity to do these premium level things. That's where this comes into play. So we have 3 SKUs that are relevant to talk about here. One is the P SKU, the premium P1 SKU, which is purchasable by going to the Microsoft admin page, admin.microsoft.com.
Office 365 admin.
That's an Office 365 admin. Can purchase those, and they are, you can buy them monthly, but you can get a discount if you buy them in a yearly chunk. Is that right, Seth?
Yeah. Ps are your year-long commits.
So it's a you're going to do Power BI, you're going to do reporting, and it's a longer commit. This starts at around $5,000 per month for a P1 SKU, and that goes for the whole year. Then your other SKU is the EM SKU. An EM SKU is basically for ISV solutions. I don't know what that ISV stands for.
Internet service vendor.
Is that what it is?
Independent service vendor.
Service. Yeah,
I
we'll
should
go with
know
that.
this.
Someone will define that on the internet. We'll go with ISV. Someone is an ISV. So the idea is you don't have access to PowerBI.com, but you do have the ability to embed reports into other parts of your organization. So this is embedding reports into internal sections and non-internal sections. But then the key thing to note here is I can now add a mix of free users and pro users in that same account. So pro users, you technically would be paying double. But like if you're having people consume the reports and not build them in PowerBI.com, you could give EM users the ability to go, you buy the capacity, and then free users can go consume the reports. So that's where, and that's also, I think, also in the P1 as well. You can also use a P1 to turn on a workspace on a P1 license both the pro user and the free user can consume content from PowerBI.com in that environment. All right, so that's P1 and EM SKUs. We can talk about how they scale up differently. Then the next one is the Azure A SKU. And the A SKU has been one of the ones that's probably had the hottest topic of debate, and where and when you can use it and how you can use it. So I'll be very clear. Licensing clearly, I think it's pretty clear now. Licensing, I think, clearly states on the A SKU, the Azure SKU, is a scale up, scale down, an hour, pay by the hour type usage. It starts at $750 a month, roughly. So it's about like $1 an hour. That's basically what it turns into. But you can pause it. I can start it for a couple days, and I can pause it, and I can unpause it and turn it back on, and then continue to use it. However, if you're embedding reports for your internal organization, it goes against the licensing of the Azure SKU. So you're not allowed to license the A1 SKU for internal usage. You can use it for development or testing, but you can't run production reports on the Azure SKU. That has to be a pure solution for, I have customers using my reports, my external customers are consuming reports, and I'm embedding my Power BI reports into some sort of application, and that's when I can consume the Azure SKU, the A1 SKU, to render reports. Okay, I think did I miss anything, guys, on the 3 premium SKUs? Maybe we talk about...
Per user?
Oh,
no, we'll
yet.
backtrack.
Okay.
Right?
We need to backtrack on that one.
On the premium level, yeah. I mean, you covered it well. The A and P, and when we introduced numeric values on top of those, it's the sizing.
Yes,
right?
correct.
So
A1, A2, A3. Yes. How many cores you get?
Yeah, I've actually EM, and the EM SKU is still an Office 365 purchase, right? So it's
That's
kind of a
correct.
pain.
Yes.
Being an avid user of the A SKU, I love the flexibility, right? Like, and I think the other distinction we should talk about after I fill in some gaps in my head, is the difference between Premium Gen 1 and Gen 2. Because those are probably some of the best licensing changes.
Yes.
And kind of, I'm not gonna say freebies, but just unlock the potential.
Yes.
I think of Power BI to where licensing isn't even a discussion, really, on an enterprise level. So the A SKU, love the flexibility, like you were saying, and then in terms of kind of A SKUs, you have 1 through 6, I think, that are really easily available, and they scale basically from 1 to 32 vCores and 3 to 100 gigabytes of data.
Yep.
And then as those scales increase, obviously you're paying more.
Yep.
And they, I think, correspond at some level to the same A SKUs correspond to the same pricing as EM and the P SKUs. As you get in there.
Yep.
So, on the low end where Mike was saying, it's like $750 a month.
Yep.
If you're an A6, you're looking at $23,000 a month or something.
Yeah.
So,
and it doubles every time you do it, because you're doubling.
Right.
So it's basically based on cores, right? You're buying a core of compute from Microsoft. And so an A1 SKU is technically 1 core, I believe. And so that 1 core is $740 a month. And then when you get an A2, you double the number of cores. You now have 2, and then it goes 4, and then it goes 6. And so every time you do that, the price doubles. So it goes A1, $750, A2, $1,400, A3, $2,800, because it keeps doubling, because you're doubling the number of cores for compute capacity.
Right. So one of the big things I do want to talk about is kind of the really significant change that occurred with the premium licensing.
Yes.
And that was like A and P SKUs, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Gen 1, you essentially have a capacity of memory that encompasses all of your data sets. So for those unfamiliar, in a pro license, you create a workspace and you just share from there. And in a premium workspace, you assign that workspace to a capacity, and all of the data sets, all your models now are hosted or belong to that, that
dedicated,
dedicated capacity that you own, instead of being on a shared infrastructure.
So I'm gonna make a point here too, because you're doing a good job starting it. I'm gonna add one more thing here too. As a pro user, some pro users hit this limit at some point when your data models get to a certain size. They become
Yeah. They're
large enough, sized enough that you get a warning. Hey, your data set's over 1 gigabyte in size. You can't publish this Power BI
Right.
file to the
Mhm.
service anymore. So that is a pro user limitation. Pro users can
Right.
only use up to 1 gig data model sizes after they're uncompressed. Like if you
Right.
publish a report, it uncompresses itself, and the data volume of that is
Well,
larger than 1 gig. It says, timeout. You can't use this. So I just
right.
want
That's
to,
a good
Or yeah. Well, or you have a lot of traffic to a certain report that on the pro, since it's not on something dedicated, it will slow down the processing, the load of that report if it's getting hit a lot.
that's called your noisy neighbor, right? So you're on in the pro
Yeah.
level, you're with other people on the same
Right.
machine, hardware essentially, and so Microsoft is managing the backend. So if you abuse that pro license too much, you get this noisy neighbor scenario where someone else's very loud report or noisy report, loading data, whatever, can take all the compute away from yours, and yours
Mhm.
becomes a bit slower. Correct.
I'm glad you stepped in there because it's been so long for me that I was restricted by the
Yeah,
limitation of
yeah,
the
no,
file size. Yeah, yeah.
but this is
'Cause
a good distinction
yeah,
between Gen 1 and Gen 2. Is fits very well in that conversation part.
sure.
Yeah.
So Gen 1 Premium, which many people still may be on, right?
Yep.
In
Could be
some
totally.
cases.
If you're
Um,
not, you need to upgrade.
you
Same price.
you have to be cognizant of all of your data sets and the sizes of them and when the refreshes kick off
Yep.
because you only have a certain total amount of capacity.
Yes.
And the larger you get in models, it be this the challenge of refresh becomes very apparent
Mhm.
because
Yep.
you kind of unpack that compressed model and kind of explode it to suck in the new data and the capacity, or as you're processing you need more memory than just the
Right.
final
Hmm.
product of that model. So a lot of people get tripped up because if they're you know on an A2 and they have a 2 gigabyte model and
Yes.
it's like we're just plain simple
Numbers. Simple numbers. Simple
numbers
math.
here. You could almost like exceed the capacity because depending on how much data you're pulling in, or if you're doing like a full refresh or something,
Yeah.
where you exceed the bounds of the total 5 gigabyte memory of capacity that you have.
Exactly.
So you have to be cognizant that there's a
Uh,
threshold
upper limit.
of an upper limit that unpacks and repacks that model every time you hit a refresh. So
There's another part here too. The model doubles in size during refresh, depending on how you. So this is also where incremental refresh. I've been doing a lot of studying on incremental refresh. So like, sorry, I'm going. This may be a
no, that's
rabbit
great.
trail, but there's refreshing a model, and then there's this new option, or not new option, an option that allows you to incrementally refresh the model with partitioning. So when you refresh a data model, if you don't have any incremental refresh applied to your data model, when you refresh it, basically it tries to load all the tables in memory of the refresh. So you basically, if your model, let's say I'm gonna say an easy number, if your model is 100 megabytes in size and you refresh it, Power BI goes out to the tables, loads all the new tables, and because it's still servicing the existing report, you can't stop the performance of the existing report while you're refreshing. So there's one model servicing the real-time request right now, and then during refresh, it doubles another model, refreshes all the information, and then at the very last second, it switches the models and says, okay, I'm going to ditch this old one and put the new data, the refresh data on top of it. So when you're doing refreshes, you have to remember this, especially in these lower capacities where you're memory constrained, was if your model was too large, you would run out of memory essentially. So
Right.
Yeah.
But
okay.
you would also have the capacity report, and we use that extensively at the other company. We had the per capacity because that was the only thing available,
Yes.
and we would basically look like, hey, why is everyone refreshing? Or we have all this high usage at 7 in the morning.
Yes.
Like, what can we do to distribute that?
Yep.
hmm
So
So the challenge that this introduces, obviously, is as you try to enterprise Power BI in an organization, last year, right? You were quickly hitting up
mhm,
challenges around, well, like in order for me to scale with additional models, like I can't pay
right,
another A5 SKU or
Yeah.
right,
whatever the case may be,
Yep.
right? Like
Yep.
so I'm stuck between really looking at the overall premium capacity pricing
Hmm?
versus like potentially what I would not necessarily a step backwards, but having to go into like look at um, Azure Analysis Services
Mhm.
as a
Yeah,
as a,
correct.
a mechanism to support larger models and things without just taking a beating in pricing,
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
right? So lots of work still has to be done if you're on Gen 1
Mhm.
around scheduling refreshes accordingly, making sure you're not stomping and chewing up your capacity or your memory, right? And hitting limitations or errors in your refresh. And you're still bound by all the data sets within that capacity falling under that
Right.
same memory umbrella.
So
So
yeah, go ahead.
no, I was
Oh
going
yeah.
to move into Gen 2 part.
Okay. Yeah, do Gen 2 because I wanted to talk about the biggest, I think, game changer from last year, but speak on Gen 2 first because I think that's more important.
And I think there's a moment here. This is the decision point. And again, I'm in my mind's eye. I'm kind of envisioning like what would I see? Like how do I see Gen One working on a machine? And what was the decision that let Microsoft go from Gen One to what we're going to talk about now is Gen Two?
Yeah.
Gen 2 changed the game for me in a lot of ways, and I felt like it was a very good change. Really like the method that it's moving here. Maybe this is bigger machines, maybe this is different hardware. I don't know what they did on the back end, or there's a little maybe there's models across multiple machines a little bit easier to understand. I don't. There's things going on here that were very well designed, and when we start talking about Gen 2, you now remove this memory restriction and we move over to how many cores are you consuming for a period of time and billing based on core usage versus memory usage. So this to me, I think is a huge. I must have been. I think Microsoft must have been looking at Gen 1 and going, wow, everyone's using a lot of compute cores and we're not using nearly as much memory as we thought we were when we built these model things.
Mhm.
So we have flexibility to let people use more memory. Our constraint is really around the cores. How many cores are being consumed for a particular organization? In
Or memory is cheap and they probably had tons of it just sitting
True.
around,
Yeah, that's what I'm
right?
saying. Yeah,
And
exactly.
really
Yeah.
Azure's a compute service, right?
Yes, it's you
You
pay
pay
for
for
compute.
compute.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. So
So
in walks
the
Gen 2. Go ahead, Seth. Take
yeah.
it from there.
No, well, and this is the significant like holy crap moment, right?
Mhm.
Where all you have to do is click upgrade on a capacity and you shed all of those memory restrictions
Mhm.
around
Mhm.
all the data sets in a single memory, capacity to basically the only limitation is that a single data set in that capacity can't exceed the total capacity.
Correct.
So that means if I have a 5 GB limit and I have a model that's 2.5 gig, right? Because you
Yeah.
need that threshold,
Yep.
whatever the case may be.
Yep.
One data set could be 2.5 gig
Correct.
or the
Or
largest ever, and then I could have as many of those as I
you could have
wanted
10 2.5
Right.
gigabyte
versus
data sets.
so the difference between the two licenses right there alone would be if I had two models that were 2.5 gig,
Yep.
I would need in Gen 1, I would need two
Right.
A2 or
Yep.
like licenses,
Yep.
and now I only need one. I still only need one.
Yep. Correct.
And it unblocks the refreshing to allow you to overlap those data set refreshes,
Yes.
which is huge because if now I don't have to stagger things within this box, I have a box for every single one of my models. And that like literally unlocks the key for me
Mhm.
in in all aspects of recommending that Power BI is a fantastic solution, and
Right.
there's a very easy curve based on usage, how large it gets, and it's a very smooth transition from one license type to another, and allows you to scale just infinitely, which is phenomenal.
So
Too.
yeah, I mean, with Gen 2, we haven't even talked about all the features that come with it. I mean, we're just talking about the back and what it helps us in terms of from the auto scaling, from the actual capacity side of your storage, so to speak. But there's all these other features that are outside of Pro, like goals, deployment pipelines, the administration
Mhm.
side of it. That's all
The
part of
feature
premium
side.
too.
Yeah.
The feature side,
Yeah.
that's absolutely integral. I think,
Well, let's list some of those out,
yeah,
I'm trying
sure.
to so let's talk about this too. So premium is not just memory capacity usage,
Right.
dedicated capacity. There's a whole bunch of other PowerBI.com centered
Yes.
activities that you get with this. And you mentioned a couple there really quickly. You said goals is a premium feature. So if you want to use goals in
Right.
the organization, that's premium. If you want to use a deployment pipeline, meaning
Mhm.
I want to move Power BI files between workspaces and have a dev test
Right.
prod, kind of centralized for like a
Right.
business user would look like, right? That's now also there as well. So deployment pipelines. Um, what other features are lit up after at the
XMLA
premium?
endpoint.
The XMLA endpoint. Oh, that's huge. So the XMLA
Yeah.
endpoint is where I can talk to the data model via code, basically, right? Instead of having
Right.
to do everything through desktop.
Right.
Huge. Like I use XML endpoint every day.
Yeah.
That is a massive win for that as well. Joe says paginated reports also gets
Yeah.
lit up at premium level. So that's another one that
Yeah.
gets lit up there as well.
Well,
Any other kind of key ones that anyone can think of? There's more. I just can't list them all
yeah.
off the top of my head.
Well, let me argue this point too, because with Gen 2, the capacity and A1, those are all obviously phenomenal solutions from the enterprise. But the one thing that I'm surprised that we haven't brought up yet, just because I think there's that middle ground, and I think we're constantly dealing with people on that. I don't need just a bunch of pro licenses, but I can't afford. It doesn't make sense to justify $5,000 a month for premium because
Correct.
I'm in the middle. Is what came out was the premium per user,
Ah, okay.
and
Yes.
so
So
yeah,
that wide gap
the
is
what?
is
Yeah,
essentially, I think, why I want to come back to
I
it,
see.
because there is
Yeah,
a huge gap
Yep.
between pro and premium, and that's what you're going to outline, which is the premium per user licensing,
yeah.
Okay.
So premium.
This
Yeah,
came
go ahead.
so premium per user came after premium.
right?
Mhm.
There was, I think, in the market was kind of saying, look, there's a huge price gap between a $10 user and a $5,000 a month thing that we
Yeah.
can then use or leverage in our company. And I think
Right.
I'm an organization of 10, 20 people,
yeah,
right?
Or even a
Well,
200.
I want all these features, but you're pricing me out of that
correct.
conversation.
They're not going to
Is where
spend $5,000 a month just to get
yeah,
the premium features. And so this is
Right.
this is where I think this premium per user, the PPU SKU came
Mhm.
from. Okay, cool.
And so premium per user, like yeah, like you said, even if you're a company, if you're going to pay the $10 a month for pro, if you're a company of 300, it doesn't make sense to do the premium unless you have these large data sets, but it's a harder sell. Like
Yep.
if you're trying to go to the company, unless you're near like 400 people, it's like, okay, now premium, we're still spending 1,000 more than we would with pro, but premium per user is, to me, it's basically the new pro. Like pro is just in a sense almost like the free version of Power BI now. And seriously, and premium per user is literally just what pro was in a sense. Premium per user has no, in a sense, it's the same idea as pro, where if you want to share a report, both people have to have the premium per user
Yes.
license.
Yep.
You still
right.
can assign a workspace like you still assign a workspace premium, but that has no inclination. Like if I want to view anything in it, I need a PPU license, regardless if I have a pro. You
Hmm.
still need pro to publish and modify. So in the sense, you're paying for the pro and the PPU, but it's not necessarily based on the workspace itself. The workspace does not get any special, in a sense, capacity because there is no dedicated capacity. So it's using that same framework. But what does happen is, again, you don't have to worry about these individual pro licenses. And like not everyone needs pro. So you don't, the features that come with pro where I can like create a workspace or do all these things. That was my biggest thing when everyone had pro, is everyone had the same availability to create a workspace or to share when maybe I didn't want them to. With premium per user, only the pros can do that. Plus, you have all these workspaces. Plus, you have the same features that you have in Gen 2 outside of like the capacity report.
Yeah.
So you have the ability to do the data flows. You have the ability to do goals, deployment pipelines, XML endpoint. And for a mid-sized company, it just makes sense. Like
Totally
it
does.
is, yeah.
It lights up
It's
everything. All the things
right.
that you need. And there's even an interesting breakpoint here, right? I have to imagine, this is how I explain it to customers. There's I like to think of rings of circles, like of people who need different licensing pieces. On a mid-sized company, a premium per user totally makes sense. You get all the
Mhm.
premium features, all the things that you need as that pro developer inside a Power BI tenant. There is a good way to supplement some of that with, or thinking this is where the licensing discussion I think really lights up here, where it says, okay, there is a small set of data modelers and people who are like heavily managing
Right.
what's going on in PowerBI.com. Then there's a larger ring of individuals who are just consuming data models that have already been built. I'm a report builder only. I don't model data. I'm not a data model and report builder. I'm just a report builder. And then there's a larger ring beyond that where I don't even build reports. I just want to see data show up, and I need to be able to look at the data, connect to the data, download data, whatever I want to do. I need to have access to the data. And so I think that it's kind of exponential, I think, as it goes in that part of the company. You have a small subset of data modelers.
Exactly.
You have a 3 to 4x size of that team in report builders, and then you have another size of that team that's even larger, another 3 to 4x, maybe 10x larger than that, of people who just need to see the data. And so I think that's where it gets really interesting to figure out, okay, where is the right blend of the licenses and who needs what kind of licensing, and which users can use a free user license with a premium attached to it, or do we do pro workspaces? And the deployment pipelines make this really interesting because you can change licensing based on what Power BI workspace that you're in. So dev and test can be premium per user, meaning I get all the premium features, all the things I want, but I don't constrain my premium capacity that I purchase to embed or share reports in the final production workspace, because I'm now automating a deployment pipeline to do. There's just a whole lot of options start opening up.
Yeah, if you want to remove the compute parts from your dev
Correct.
and test environments,
Exactly.
Whereas before it was like, oh man, I can't afford to do that, right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
refreshing data. But yeah, I think the same things as far as like how you can segment those things out.
Yes.
The feature sets that you're now enabled on a per user license as opposed to that big one.
Yes.
I think it's taken, like for those of us who have been around for a while, like 6 whatever years, but I love the licensing story right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a lot of value there.
Yep.
That inherently makes the price you pay very reasonable.
Yeah.
Like if not just a steal in some cases, when
Right.
when you see all of the capabilities and things that you're getting if you're utilizing them,
Yes,
right?
that's true. I
So,
also
yeah.
look at like other BI tools. When you look at other tools and what the price to value cost comparison kind of looks like, it really is. There are some other tools that do BI things very well, but I think their pricing is much higher than what you see Microsoft come in as,
And not nearly the same features.
not
Not
nearly
just the tool.
Yes, correct. And I think this is where Microsoft is strengthening their BI muscle, right? Because it's really like they've been doing reporting and BI intelligence on SQL Server and SSRS for like eons. They have a whole rich knowledge base of like how this stuff works, how it needs to get deployed, what features people need to have, what they don't need to have. I think that they're the largest vendor in that market, I would assume, at this point.
Yeah,
And this is
I
why
mean,
you don't. Yeah. Okay.
no, we talk about game
Yeah.
changers, right?
Yeah.
But Chris Wagner points out, previously in the chat here, like I'm not like they've unlocked the memory constraint of tabular model of like your big back ends,
Right.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, by offering these SKUs that bypass that and say, hey, we only care about compute. Like, think about that for a minute, man.
Huge.
Like
Right.
the amount of information and data, like it just matches where industries have to go because we're dealing with larger and larger and larger amounts of data that you like in order to create performant reporting. Like I think they've not sidestep, but like that's a huge competitive advantage
Yeah.
in that like you've unbounded me not only to maximize the resources on my capacity, right? So ultimately I'm going to hit a threshold. You're going to hit a threshold of compute, right? Throw enough models on there and you're going to slow down at some point because of the consumption and usage, but like the value of what you get per capacity
Really high.
like for organizations is so high.
And you don't like the price.
Yeah.
And if you don't like the price, you go back through and you figure out which models can we tune. How do we make the like? So this is where I really like is you actually get really tight cost control on this too, because you can say, well, we're on we're on a P1 right now, and we think we need to go to a P2 because we need more capacity. Well, then you could sit back and say, okay, do we really need to make that huge jump to a P2? What models do we have out there? Which ones are adding value? You can now have that business leader discussion and say, what do we need to do to either stay where we're at or spend more because we're getting enough value out of the data that the the revenue so this is why it goes back to our comments. These reports better do one of two things: save you money or make you money. And if it's not doing one of those two things, turn it off.
Right. And this is why I think it's always wrong to call Power BI a reporting tool. It's a platform with all these other features.
Yes.
100%.
So the one thing I do want to ask for someone who's played in both playgrounds, the capacity and now PPU, the one I don't want to say issue, but the one thing I wish there was more of a marriage on with the premium per user is that capacity side of things. So right now it's like I said, it's basically Power BI Pro 2.0 because in order to play in it, everyone
Should have named
needs
it
to
Pro
be
Plus.
Pro Plus. Yes,
Everything's plus these
exactly.
days. Disney
You know,
Plus,
it really, it's absolutely Pro Plus.
YouTube Plus. I mean, I know YouTube's not Plus, but there's like everything. I feel like it's coming out to a
Yeah.
plus on top of it.
If they called it Pro Plus, I think that actually makes a little more sense, I guess, because yes, you get the features, but everyone needs the licensing, right? Everyone needs a power premium per user license. So we still deal with the same issues like, hey, I can't access the report. Okay, let's check your license.
Yep, exactly.
So the workspaces don't
Yeah.
necessarily matter. I love the premium capacity configuration where you sign the workspace and any report in there can be viewed
Yep.
by the organization.
Simplifies things
Simplified. Also from a
exponentially.
governance side of things. So,
Yeah.
like, yes, like one, the report has to be in a premium per user license in order for it to be viewed by other PPU. But that was one of the things that we used extensively was anyone who's creating a report could not view once we switched to premium Gen 1 because it wasn't in a premium workspace.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like, hey, I can't see my report. Like, well, you have to go through the right channels.
Correct.
And anyone who was in charge of a workspace that had a premium had to go through certain training, or else we turn it off.
Yeah.
The other thing that PPU
I like
lacks
that.
is the ability for capacity reporting. There's none. There's no capacity report that like the template that Power BI comes out.
Well, there is, but I've had a lot of
What?
problem.
Not with
I've had a
PPU?
lot of problem with it. There
Not
is
with
a
the PPU.
there is oh no with PPU.
Not with PPU. Only with capacity.
The premium Gen 2 report does not report on premium per user users.
No. Well, it doesn't report on it's not a capacity reporting because
So it's a feature unlock. It's not a capacity
Gotcha.
add per
Right.
user.
So let me ask a question. Why do you need that, Tommy? Why do you need premium per user capacity monitoring? I'm just curious here because I don't like I turn on PPU. I don't care about capacity. Like it just works. It works really well. So I'm not tuning things at that point. What are you tuning at that level?
One, I like features. Number one, two,
I like pretty pictures.
I like yes, I like
Okay, got it.
kind of thing. But I mean, the other part too is if everyone's viewing or everything's getting refreshed at once, things still do slow down, and you don't have unlimited scaling with PPU.
So you're noticing if everyone's on a premium per user,
Yeah,
you still need to do some level of coordination management. You're still thinking about
Because
certain things there that to make sure
yes.
you're not over scheduling. Like every report's refreshing at midnight.
Or is everyone viewing this? Do we need to do something to this report? No,
Gotcha.
it's the exact same thing because you still have a limit. It's not PPU is not unlimited.
It's just a
Or
higher
else-
limit.
It's just it works differently. You don't have your own dedicated server, so to speak, or your dedicated
So
process.
are you still bound by the 1 gig limitation on a pro license?
No, you have 10, the same.
You get
So
10.
so you still get the same 10, but it unlike with the Gen 2 or Gen 1, where that workspace is part of your own, like in a sense, you'll have your own server dedicated to your premium capacity. It's still managed by Microsoft, so it'll still get allocated or all allocated. Yeah, that's how I say it. Deal
Yeah,
with the
I mean,
yeah.
the
And
so
also
I can see how some of those reports would be useful, right? But
Right.
at the same time, like it's a challenge. Your performance issues could be a challenge from the standpoint that it could be the model,
It could be
which
Microsoft, right?
you could dive into,
Right.
right?
Yep.
You've tools to performance tune.
Right.
The unknown or challenge
Right.
point is what Kevin brings up in the chat, which
Right.
is
Mhm.
you're on shared capacity,
Right.
which
Yeah.
means someone else could be impacting
Exactly.
you.
Well, yeah, and all those things, but at the same time, the data that comes out of that also out of the box to see like when are these spikes happening? Is it always at a certain time of day? What data sets are always causing this? Like you can get some of this from audit logs, but not the same.
But
So
I
I
think
would still
Microsoft is trying to make this like the easy button a little bit, right? They want to make sure like you pay for premium per user, like you're giving up control by doing that, and you're saying, Microsoft, you manage it for me. I just need my reports and data to be
Right.
live and working. Like that's kind of what that's the same thing you kind of do in pro license level. You're like, hey, I just want to use things and make things
Right.
work. You guys manage on the back end. It's up to Microsoft to
So,
make it more efficient, right? So
so
you're
that's why it's Pro Plus,
that's why it's Pro
not
Plus.
necessarily premium per user. So
If you think about like the gripes of most people between pro and premium,
Yeah.
it was you're blocking me from using features. It
right,
wasn't it
Yes.
wasn't I have these massive capacities that I
you're
need to
right.
manage and I
Yeah,
want to do that on a user level.
Yeah.
It
It's
was
like I want to
I
use
can't
paginated
use
reports.
paginated reports,
Yes.
right?
right.
Right?
Yes.
And for that step, I think it
Yeah,
it does do a good job,
yeah.
right?
So how do you sell a company? Because I think we're all saying if you
Well,
have pro,
first you start with a
sure,
lot of work and then somebody else wants the company. Oh,
Yes.
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
no, but I mean, like I think we're all saying the same thing. Where you can't just have pro anymore. Like in a sense, pro by itself to me is obsolete.
I,
Or
I'm a big fan of start with spending as little much as possible at the beginning, right? So
Mhm,
I'm a huge
yeah,
fan of like, all right, you don't start it free because that gets you that's too limited for what companies need to do.
mhm,
So anyone who wants to touch PowerBI.com, we always start you at like a pro level licensing. If you're doing any sort of embedding where I spend a lot of my time, we're automatically starting with an Azure A1 SKU
mhm,
that fits within the licensing terms. I can easily use that to embed reports for the embedded solution for the clients. So my world is literally around like pro users and A SKUs is where
mhm,
I pretty much live. I don't spend a ton of time working with premium P user SKUs just because I'm 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 building embedded applications and that's
right,
kind of where I need to live. I'm
right,
now working with clients that are getting more comfortable with that and so now they're moving into like okay, well we need a bit more feature sets. They're managing their own models and now they're looking at like premium per user. So I start at the pro level, start there. We work on a project for a number of weeks or whatever, or months, or figure stuff out for them until they say we have blockages, things that are challenging, and then
mhm.
you start looking at what are the options to go up from there. That's kind of how I approach it. Seth, Tommy,
Yeah,
how
I
do you
would agree
approach
with
it?
that. I mean, the pro license is if you're looking at it from an organization, you need
Yeah.
it just for bare minimum sharing, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
The thing to keep in mind is know what the features are unlocked in
right,
PPU because it's gonna be a feature thing before it's gonna be a sizing and
right,
capacity
I agree
thing.
with that.
And there's a very like I said, there's a nice
right,
smooth curve here. So if like you understand the features that PPU offers, maybe paginated is part of like maybe you have 1,000
right.
old school SSRS reports that
Yep.
you want to convert into report builder. It takes 5 minutes, literally. Like
Yeah.
that's how
Yeah,
easy that experience is. So if you need to get off a platform of your own on-premises server and you want to,
right.
push it out into the
Sounds like
Power
you're
BI,
speaking from experience.
oh dude, I love it. I love it.
I mean, I
Um,
would kinda
you
yeah,
take an old, like old, file type, file
Oh, RDL.
RDL
already,
Yeah,
file,
RDLs.
and basically just upload that into report builder, and it automatically works. It just
Boom.
automatically works, and then you deploy it to Power BI.
I mean, I would
It's a
yeah,
phenomenal experience as
I
far as
kinda
like
argue
transitioning.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
So is that part of your user? Like then yes,
I,
then
I think it's worthy to.
PPU is where you start.
I think it's worthy to say so for your frictionless upgrade, Seth. I think it's worthy to note. Thank you, Chris Finland. We are publicly announcing. Thank you for all your
Love
hard
that.
work on
Yeah,
the pageant. I mean, that was his. I believe that was his baby, pretty much getting RDLs and
yeah.
paginated reports up and running inside the Power BI environment. So, Chris Finland, thank you very much for your hard work. You've done an amazing job on the feature set. It works really well. Seth is incredibly happy with you.
Yeah, I mean, well, you think about SSRS has been part of and is part of organizations, right?
mhm,
And when you like server costs alone, like you want to transition into Power BI, like you can create your own a workspace that is
mhm,
your SSRS reports,
Yeah,
and
dump him
it
there.
it probably is no less. I could probably crank out, like I said, with reconfiguration, 5-10 minutes per report. I mean, just to
I think
into
that was
Power
one of my
BI, boom,
resolutions
into
this
Power
year,
BI.
actually.
And
Definitely.
when you think about the sunk costs, from all the infrastructure to a PPU or something like that, amazing. That alone,
Yeah,
right, is amazing. But you get a lot more with the PPU licensing. Imran makes a point. If we weren't clear, just in the same way, end consumers need a pro. You need a pro relationship. PPU is the same.
mhm,
PPU, if you use it, the end consumer needs a PPU. So you
Correct.
are doubling your
yeah,
costs, but at the same time, that's a cost discussion of like existing infrastructure versus, you know, in transition versus, you know, the features and capabilities that you get. And that's where I think the value to the business, right, what is applied to things you can do with those additional
Mhm.
features. And then it's a scale problem, right? Then it goes
Yeah.
from PPU into, I want to manage my organization easier. I don't want to do this like messing around with per user licensing every single time.
Mhm.
My capacities are, you know, growing, and I want to manage my own thing and not be impacted by people. And now we go into the P SKU,
Right.
right? So
Yeah.
very easy transition, and I like it. And then you still obviously get the additional things with the premium licensing around
Yeah.
XML endpoint, like all of the capabilities we have as far as unlocking the back end of the house per se, because
Yeah.
we want to manage that as best as possible.
Yeah.
You get better reporting,
That's
et
where
cetera, and
that's where
it's hidden.
governing comes into play. Like that's what
Yeah.
your
Right.
your traditional IT and organization shows up. Your traditional IT org shows up at like that back end side. That's what they're managing. That's what they're owning.
Right.
So you really do need like that switch to say, okay, we're unlocking the back end portion of this for governing IT to show up and tune, perform, optimize from
Yeah.
that standpoint. Totally
And I
agree.
would say if you're an organization that's saying we're going to invest in Power BI and you have 450 people, I think I would say go to the capacity because you're
Would
already
make
going to be at a
sense.
cost. Yeah. So if your company already near that limit
Yeah.
anyways, I wouldn't say start a pro or start a PPU because
It's
you're
not,
going to
yeah,
want,
not even worth it.
Yeah.
not even worth it.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I like the fact that it's not just a cost conversation, right? Like
Right.
you reach
Mhm.
a like I think one of the initial calculators out there that Microsoft had was like, if you have X number of
Right.
users, like now premium makes sense, and like that's not even it's not even like the full conversation anymore,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? Like
Agreed.
the features and capabilities that you now get and the ability to throw a ton out there
Yep.
kind of move that needle back to, okay, this makes a lot more
Right.
sense, even though I'm only sharing to 200
Right.
folks or something like that.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say if you were trying to sell it is one of the things is take three things into account with whoever's in charge of that or your boss is look at your usage. Like our usage keeps going up. We get more people looking at it. So look at the audit logs, show them the actual like the interest garnering in it. Tell them about the features and say the yeah, we'll pay a little more for the premium than we would for pro, but look at all these other features that our BI team needs and needs to adapt. So
You
I
said
think
three
the other 2
things.
points in there, the
what
other 2
did I
points
say
I would
too?
make,
You said two. I'm looking for three.
Okay.
uh,
Look at your
The
usage.
the
Look,
third is look at your refresh schedule and see if things are slowing down. Say when people are
got it.
complaining. Yeah. So Sure.
I think the other things I would add in there, Tommy, are the
Yeah.
ones that you mentioned before, right? Think about the infrastructure you get
Mhm.
and the feature capabilities that you have with those premium SKUs,
Mhm.
as drivers to whether or not the value is there
Right.
to get into that. And there was a third point, but I lost it. So when we're closing, I'll
You're
probably interrupt you.
refreshing. Yeah.
Well, the
I think
refresh and
yeah.
capacity, yeah, the refresh
Yeah.
alone, changing how you have access to
Right.
those data models, etc.
And I'll think I'll add one. I'll add one more things to consider here as you're looking at going up the SKU pattern for higher level SKUs. One thing I think organizations underestimate immensely is if you are building any kind of customer based solution at all, every customer I've talked to has data internally, and there's someone in your organization is sending Excel files to customers for their data. You need to have a better solution around catering data for your customers. Period. Like it just has to happen. So you need to really treat your really need to treat your users um, as a or data as an asset. And I think looking at higher level premiums and looking at embedding and looking at putting it inside your application, you're building reporting internally so you could run your business. You
Mhm.
also need to build reporting for your customers. So treat this is the beginning or this is the start of what I feel like is data becomes an asset for the company.
Mhm.
This is that deeper conversation because what better value can you give to your customers to give them clear information about what you're doing with whatever it is, shipping, manufacturing, financial stuff, whatever the things are, right? Customers will not want to go to somebody else if they can't get the same level of rich reporting that you can give them. And Power BI is
Right.
a quick win to take stuff that you already are doing internally and light it up for your customers. So it really treats that data as a valuable asset to your organization, and you use it to monetize. Like what you're already
And
doing.
that's a
Right.
compounding asset too, right?
Yeah.
Like, so
Yeah.
I gripe a bit because
It's a
we use
differentiator.
ASQs and embedding externally all the time, and
Yeah.
there are things that I'd love to see in the tool. But if you think about it, like when you adopt Microsoft Power BI as a platform,
Mhm.
the that asset increases in value
Mhm.
with you doing nothing, right?
Yeah.
The constant innovation that they continually put out
Yes.
increases the value of your product to your end customers by
Yes.
you doing nothing,
Exactly.
right? A perfect example of that is, and you could argue a lot of these features like, oh, that should have been there in the first place. Well, come on, man, nothing perfect, but
Yes.
innovating and having things increase in value over time. Like, did I have to have custom dev done, or us go through,
Mhm.
a ton of money and time sunk
Mm.
into exporting data in the format that the Power BI table was set up in? No, they just added that feature. So now, like in the Matrix, it'll export exactly like the Matrix
Yeah.
instead of the tabularized format. Like, it simplified, right?
Yeah.
Example, but at the same time, like
Totally agree.
that constant innovation. Like, you want
Co-
to plug into ML workflows and get machine learning algorithms that are already plugged into data flows and think like that's you already get that,
Look at the
right?
roadmap. They have an entire section devoted to things
Right.
coming up for premium
Huge
only.
value.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an underestimated statement. There's a full team of people developing your reporting solution for you by jumping onto this like if you were going to build all this from scratch, it's a lot of work to do this one. You spend a lot of money on developers to build this same type of solution, and now you get a huge team, and you're paying the same amount each month, and you're getting new features each month. Oh man, it's good. All right, with that,
So
Tommy,
so here we were licensing. We'll never reach an hour. It's
Yeah.
probably one of our longest episodes.
longer episode. Here we go.
They just letting everyone know they have, I think, over 15 what's new and what's playing on the Wave 2 for premium only.
Cool.
Yeah,
So
it's gonna get is. We thought the story was good already. It's gonna get better
hybrid
as we go.
tables, goals, pipelines.
Love it.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well,
We'll
Tommy's getting pulled away. He's got tons of reports to go fix because his dates are all screwed up for the
Time to
2022.
refinance my tech debt.
Time's gotta go.
Refinance my
Yeah,
tech debt.
yeah, he's gonna go get some time on the tech debt.
And
For those
just
of you
move everything to
who've been
23.
following us along, I hope you enjoyed our riveting discussion. Super engaging around licensing, around Power BI. If you don't know anything about licensing, this is probably one of the best overviews of licensing I've heard, maybe from the community. So, if you are confused about licensing, go back to the beginning, start over again. If you have someone else who's confused about licensing, tell them to go watch the episode. Maybe that'll help them clarify where are the different breakpoints and licensing recommendations that we would give if we were working with you as clients or something along those lines.
I love the humility, by the way.
Our
This
only
is by far the most humble thing ever. This is best Power BI content in the world.
Awesome, Tommy. Love it. So if you like this podcast, if you think we're super humble and you want to engage with us on a weekly basis, please just tell one other person about the podcast. Let them know, hey, this has been fun. I learned something, and it was engaging and entertaining as well. Hopefully, Tommy, where else can you find the podcast if you're not watching live?
If you are watching live, or if you're not watching live, whichever way you want to go, you can find I'm done, man. It's only 3 in the morning. You can subscribe on Apple and Spotify. Look at all of our previous episodes, anywhere a podcast is available. If you want to join the conversation live, what amazing community we have on YouTube and LinkedIn. Follow Power BI Tips on YouTube and LinkedIn, and every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 in the morning Central Time. Join us. Join the chat.
Awesome. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you on Thursday.